Hey, everybody should have the notification that we're going live. So I think, Madison, we have 8 people that have accepted. So I think
Okay.
we have a couple more that'll be joining us.
That's okay. We can hang tight for another minute or two and then we'll get started.
Hi, it's Jeff Arbus. I am here.
The notification that we're going live.
Oh, we got a feedback loop there, Virginia.
Oh.
If you mute the, yeah, okay.
I just had to get to the right screen.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen okay?
I don't think it's been shared yet.
I'll try.
Okay.
It is. Give me a second, it's doing something weird.
Okay, I will try on my end as well to pull up the,
I had it pulled up, it just wasn't giving me it as an option. Do you want to try on your end, Madison? It's not even giving it to me as an option, even though I have it pulled up.
yeah, I have an older one that I'll just pop up here.
I think we almost have everybody.
Okay. Can you, what are you seeing?
Oh, I've got it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Are you just seeing the slides, not the notes side?
Just the slides.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, we can get started, and if people join along the way, that's great too. So thanks everyone for taking some time today to speak or to learn a little bit about procedures, meeting procedures for committees of councils. My name is Madison Zupa. For those who don't know me, I'm the Deputy City Clerk for the city, And the clerk's office often helps and acts as a liaison to our staff who are in charge of boards and committees to help out with meeting procedures. So we just want to take some time to thank everybody for joining us today. And certainly if you have any questions after, I'll do my best to answer. But if there's something that I can't answer today, you can get in touch with either myself or Virginia, and we can get you an answer after the session. So meeting procedures for committees of council. This is a presentation we often do when committee appointments happen at the beginning of the term, and sometimes we'll do it throughout if we have a lot of new people who are joining the committee. So, and I know we have some people today that are new to committees of council, so welcome and thank you for taking the time to volunteer and put your name forward. It's important to be involved in these things, so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's committed the time to help us move these priorities forward and provide recommendations to council. So boards and committees. So local boards and committees of council include advisory and other committees or boards whose members are appointed by council for an ongoing purpose. Special committees appointed by council or the head of council at any time as is deemed necessary. So we do have a number of boards that have been static over time. We do a board review usually once per term of council to see if things are still being, efficient and effective. So we'll go through a board review, but we have a number of boards and committees that like there's Parks and Recreation, Municipal Heritage, Cultural Competency, the Cultural Vitality Committee, my apologies. And then also the there's a new anti-hate committee that I know has just been members were appointed to council more recently. So over time, these things evolve. So you can see how there's been some longstanding committees and then new ones as things come up. So we're looking forward to an ongoing relationship with all of our boards and committees and making sure procedures are followed. So governance versus management. So council provides the governance and the oversight and the planning and the big picture items. Operations are the responsibility of staff. So for for instance, the Municipal Heritage Committee, it'll be Virginia or her designate that is the staff that is there to help bring those operational plans, those strategies, those budget items, and make sure everything's in alignment with the corporate strategic plan. And we're currently doing a review of the corporate strategic plan, and it will come back to council at some later date to be approved. And we'll have to look at making sure the boards and committees that we have align with that new corporate strategic plan. The board, in its advisory capacity, then makes recommendations for council consideration or approval. So you'll often see something come out of a board or committee meeting that will end up going back to council through a council report written by staff saying, the Municipal Heritage Committee recommends X, Y, and Z, and then council will have the final approval on those recommendations. So often the boards and committees are providing recommendations for council's consideration and approval. Sometimes it results in budget requests, and Virginia or her staff or the staff liaison for your committee will take care of those items. And Virginia, feel free to jump in at any point in time if you have anything to add. So I try to make it a bit flexible and informal today. So by all means. So accountability and transparency. We have a number of pieces of legislation or policies and procedure documents that we follow. So there's the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, which we'll talk about a little bit in the presentation, the city's procedure bylaw, which is what the overarching document that we use to help guide our procedures through meetings, and the code of conduct. So the procedure bylaw 2022-100, it applies to the calling and proceedings of meetings of council and of local boards and committees. The committee means any advisory or other committee, subcommittee, which is really important for us to address, that it includes subcommittees of committees of council, or similar entity of which at least 50% of the members are also members of one or more councils or local boards. And local board does not include police services boards or public library boards. They have their own legislation, and they are different than they're a little bit different than what we're going to be dealing with today. So the definition of a meeting. A meeting means any regular, special, or other meeting of a council, of a local board or committee of either of them where a quorum of members is present and your staff liaison will know how many members there are on the committee, and where members discuss or otherwise deal with any matter in a way that materially advances the business or decision making of the council, local board, or committee. So this is important too when, say, maybe you're having an event, like there might be an event in which members of the committee will be attending. It's okay to be present together if there's a quorum, but you can't be materially advancing the business or the decision making of your committee. So say you're all at a I want to say a municipal heritage event, for example. It's okay that you're all there, but you can't be talking about the business of the committee. Group email discussions is also something we want to be able to point out, that group email discussions constitute a meeting. When you have a group email discussion, the public is not privy to that information. So we need to make sure that meetings are open to the public as per the legislation that we have open meeting provisions that we must follow. So you can't do group emails. So if you're getting information from a staff member, just make sure not to reply all. If you have questions, you can bring them to your next meeting. You can talk to staff about, if you have questions, but often what staff will do is make sure that everyone has all the information and is shared, but we don't want to be having conversations through email because those constitute a potentially a closed meeting. So we want to make sure that we don't do those group email discussions. So the agenda is set by the chair in consultation with the staff resource, posted to the city website at least 24 hours in advance. We suggest longer the better, like so that the public can have access to that agenda and see what's relevant, and if they want to, tune in or come to the meeting, including all attachments as well. So you can't just put, a point on the agenda, and if there's a presentation or attachment that goes along with it, it needs to be included. The public needs to be able to review that information. The business considered in order set forth on the agenda. The chair may vary with boards and committees of council. It's a little bit less formal in the sense of being able to move things around that makes sense, or it's a little bit more informal when it comes to the order on the agenda. And a member may ask that a motion is placed on the agenda provided they have a seconder. So we can talk about motions in a little bit as well. So like I said, we have open meeting provisions. So the meeting shall be open to the public and no person shall be excluded therefrom except for improper conduct. The notice of the meetings is published on the city's website, including the agendas and minutes. And I'm looking at Virginia right now. She usually takes care of that for her committees, where she'll coordinate with our communications office to make sure the agendas and minutes are posted. The public may record by video or audio. So with when you have a committee meeting, we do live stream them now. That was something that we ended up doing through COVID to allow for public observation of the meeting. People may come into the meeting, the media may come into the meeting and have a recording of it. And subcommittees are also subject to the procedural bylaw and open meeting provisions. So just because you have something you're working on in a smaller group of committee members, then you're still subject to those open meeting provisions. So if you have a subcommittee meeting, you'll still need to have it open to the public. There are times where closed meetings can happen. So section 239(2) of the Municipal Act states that meetings can only be closed if a matter relates to the following provisions. I'm not going to go through each provision specifically today, but if you have a question about whether the information can go into a closed meeting, feel free to reach out to Virginia or myself. The main ones that we deal with at council, for instance, are the disposition of property or acquisition of property, sometimes labor relations, advice for solicitor-client privilege. Sometimes there's different information that's supplied in confidence from other levels of government. So there are reasons to go into a closed meeting. And if you have questions about whether or not it can be enclosed, make sure you reach out to your staff liaison and we'll work through it together with myself, Rachel, and there's others in our legal department that we can speak to about it. So the big thing is that this section of the Act is permissive, not prescriptive. So the meeting may be closed for these reasons, but we really try to promote that if it can be an open, it should be an open. There is training and education, like even today, we're doing a training and education. It's an education session for a number of our committee members. We don't have a specific committee meeting today to have that, but we would, if there was a training session for council, often our philosophy is to have it in open if we can. So that's one thing that you can go into closed for, but we often stay in open if we can, right? That's one of our things we try to promote. Sorry, there we go. Education and training. So a meeting of council or local board of either can be closed to the public if the following conditions are both satisfied. So the meeting is held for the purpose of educating or training the members, and at the meeting, no member discusses or otherwise deal with any other matter in the way that materially advances the business or decision making of the council, local board, or committee. So it's really something that we try to keep open if we can, like I've stated, but. Electronic meetings. So this is something that really came through from COVID-19 pandemic. So often we will have a link to the YouTube channel and it should appear on the agenda or like the city's website so that the public can know where to get the information. If you're having an in-person meeting, often we list the location of the meeting so that people can attend in person if they choose to. And we get a lot more public viewing through the YouTube channel. So we find it's a really good way to engage more members of the public, to know what's going on in the committee meetings and the decision making that's happening and the recommendations that are going to come to council. If the live stream is lost during the meeting, we adjourn it. If you can get it back up and running in a couple minutes if there's just technical difficulties, but if not, you cannot advance the business of the meeting without the YouTube channel going. Like, we need to make sure that the public who was tuning into that YouTube channel is still privy to that information, and we don't want any discussions to go on without the public. And there have been instances in the past through the Ombudsman's office where there has been complaints that have come forward saying, the live stream was dropped, they still carried on with the business, and that's considered in some of those decisions, they could be considered closed meetings. So which brings us right into closed meeting investigations. So the Municipal Act provides that a person may request an investigation by the provincial ombudsman as to whether the council or committee or board met improperly and closed. So they'll investigate, provide and publish a report, recommendations if we've been found to met improperly and closed. And then council must pass a resolution to how it intends to address the report. So there have been instances in the past, and it's good learning for all of us to go through these things in some ways, because we can always be doing better on trying to make information available. Our key goals are to be open and transparent, and we really want to make sure that that we're doing those things. So if someone complains and they felt that the meeting was improperly closed, they can go through the Ombudsman's office. The Ombudsman will, their staff will get in touch with our staff, go through it, publish a report. And we've done this. We've been through this process, and we continuously are trying to make improvements to make it a more accountable and transparent process. So rules of conduct and debate. The chair presides. So if there's a chair of a committee that you have questions about chairing that, or what might constitute improper conduct, feel free to get in touch with the staff liaison or our office, and we can try to provide some more information on that. The board or committee meetings are held in the committee of the whole, which allows the rules, like I was saying, it's a bit more relaxed. The number of times a member is allowed to speak and those types of things are not as prescriptive, say, as a council meeting. So it's a little bit more relaxed, and people can kind of it's meant to be more so that you can have those discussions, but the chair still presides. So if they feel that something is going on too long, or maybe they have to move on to the next agenda item, it's really up to the chair to manage the meeting. So the conduct of members: a member shall not disobey the provisions of this bylaw or decision of the chair on questions or order of practice, or upon the interpretation of rules of procedure, or breach parliamentary decorum. And that's the parliamentary decorum is, where we're talking about the words we use and the actions we take. So if you have questions about that, we certainly can help with that in the future. Motions. So if you have a motion, if the committee wants to put a motion forward and you have, they'll should be in writing. The operative clause that we use shall commence with the words resolved that and shall be moved and seconded. So you need a mover and a seconder before you can hear the motion. And Virginia I'm looking at her. She deals with these a lot, so she's very familiar with them. But if in the event that you need any help, certainly feel free to reach out to the clerk's office. A member who wishes to introduce a motion not on the agenda that is of substantive nature must introduce the notice of motion. So this is something that if something comes up at the meeting and you want to make a big decision, but it wasn't initially on the agenda, you can say at the next meeting, I'm going to bring a motion forward. If you can get they still need a mover and seconder at that time, but you can say, I'm going to bring a motion forward at the next meeting to consider this matter. You can't deal with things that are of substantive nature or that the public didn't have proper notice for, right? So you don't want to bring anything forward that the public hasn't had a chance to, read about and digest and all of that. So you want to move that to the next meeting. The finality of the vote. So subject to a motion to reconsider, a motion once decided may not be reintroduced for 12 months. A motion to reconsider must be moved by a member who voted with the prevailing side and seconded either by a member who voted with the prevailing side or a member who was absent. So a reconsideration motion is the only way in which a subject can be brought back for discussion in the event that a decision has been made on it. So if that comes up in your committee or board meetings, just let us know. We can walk through that. It doesn't happen often for boards and committees, and it happens on occasion at council. I think in the last little while, we've maybe had, one or two reconsiderations that I can think of off the top of my head. So, but there's specific rules around reconsideration, so I won't get into those today, but certainly Virginia and I or your staff liaison can discuss that if that's something that someone wants to have happen. So relevance of debate. On all motions, discussions must be relevant to the subject under consideration. Again, you want to keep the discussions and the topics at hand to things that have been laid out on the agenda. We can't go off onto different subject matters or agenda items that weren't advertised as such. So we want to make sure it's all relevant to the subjects under consideration. And again, the chair will help, control that discussion and make it, control is not the right word, but, help shape that discussion and make sure that we stay on task. Quorum. So the mayor is an ex officio member of all committees, but not counted in quorum. So if the mayor shows up at the meeting, the mayor can do that, but not as part of quorum unless the mayor has been appointed as a committee member. So no business shall be considered unless a quorum is present, and our staff liaisons generally, are really good at knowing the quorum of the meeting, and we won't start a meeting unless you have enough members present. And there is a time limit for, like, if you're running late, make sure you let your staff liaison know, because there is a time limit where at such point the meeting needs to be canceled and reconvened. So if you're running, 10 minutes late, just make sure your staff person knows so that they can announce that and say, we're just waiting for one more person. We'll be started shortly. But it's really important because we can't do anything without quorum. The majority of members, and if it's lost during the meeting ends. But there is one instance where if you lose quorum because of a conflict of interest, your meeting wouldn't end. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But if you had, say you had a quorum is 6, and I raise my hand and I say, Virginia, I have a conflict of interest on this matter. My spouse works for this organization, or whatever the conflict might be. You lose quorum because your quorum was 6 and now you're down to 5 members, but you can still move forward because you're not going to lose your quorum because of a conflict of interest. Because after that item is discussed, I'm coming back into the meeting and we're going to continue on. So just be mindful of that, and staff know about quorum requirements. So the administration, the secretary shall keep the minutes, record without note or comment, provide the notice of the meetings, post the minutes and agenda to the website, and perform the clerical functions as required. Often this is your staff liaison that will perform those functions of the board or committee. The chair of the committee votes. I think there's this idea that the chair doesn't vote. but the chair is a voting member, and so just I think there's just that perception, so we wanted to make sure that was really clear. It's a recorded vote, so everyone votes. There's no abstentions. So the only time that you wouldn't be counted in the vote is that if you actually left the room. So say you were, you had to leave the meeting, you would be counted as absent and not there. But if you are in the room and you choose not to vote, it still is counted in the vote. So you can't abstain. The only time you're not going to vote is if you're absent or if you have a conflict of interest, if you declare a conflict. And a tied vote is defeated. So if it's 3-3, it's voted as defeated. So just be mindful of that as well. We talked a little bit about the Ombudsman of Ontario. They're their closed meeting investigator. They can review the complaints about the administrative actions and decisions of municipalities, but they can't overturn decisions of elected officials or direct them on public policy. So oftentimes, if there's a decision about a closed meeting, they will provide us recommendations, and they'll review our policies and procedures, and they'll provide us recommendations, but they can't overturn the decision of the elected officials. The next part is regarding our integrity commissioners. So the integrity commissioner investigates applications of code of conduct. So members and councils and local boards. The application of any procedures, rules, or policies governing ethical behavior. Application of conflicts of interest to members and council and local boards. Requests from members for advice regarding obligations under the Code of Conduct, procedures, rules, policies, or the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So I don't know if a copy of the Code of Conduct has been circulated to everyone on the call today, but if you haven't received it, I will make sure to pass it along so that you can give it a read. Because if the code of conduct is breached, then this is when and if a complaint is made, the integrity commissioner gets involved. And provision of education information regarding the above. So often we'll have the integrity commissioner when there's a new, maybe a new council or that kind of thing, would provide educational material to us to talk about the process and the code of conduct. So the Code of Conduct is a requirement under the Municipal Act, and the Code of Conduct needs to be established for municipal councils, advisory committees, and local boards. The Code of Conduct addresses gifts and benefits, confidentiality, use of board property or committee property, influence on staff, improper use of influence. And any of these complaints, like I said, can go to the integrity commissioner, and the results of the inquiry are reported to both council and to the local board or committee. And on our city website, there's a whole section on the Code of Conduct and the Integrity Commissioners. So if you have any questions about that, I can forward the website for more information. Okay, so there's a few people who didn't receive it, so I'll make sure to pass that along to Travis as well, and for the next meeting. So no problem, we'll make sure that gets to you. And the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So this is where the member of the board or committee has a pecuniary financial interest, direct or indirect, in any matter, and is present at the meeting which the matter is being discussed. So the member, prior to the consideration of the matter, will disclose the interest and the general nature of it, not take part in the discussion or vote on any question in respect to the matter. It needs to be written, so we do have forms that we provide. So if you do declare a conflict of interest, you can fill out the proper form and provide it to the clerk's office. And through your staff liaison, and shall not attempt in any way to influence the voting. So if you feel like you have a conflict of interest, certainly we can chat about that. But my general information around conflict of interest, if you feel you have one, declare it. When you're in closed session, you don't have to state the nature thereof, but you have to leave the room. So in open, a lot of people leave anyways just to remove themselves from the situation, but in closed, you must remove yourself from the room. And the interest extends to the interest of family members. So it's if you have a spouse or a brother or sister or family member that works at has a financial interest in in a situation, then that would count as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be your own direct. It can be an indirect pecuniary interest as well. We talked about this. When the meeting's closed, the member must leave the room. When absent from the meeting at which the matter is considered, the member should declare at the first meeting attended by the member after. So even if you're not at the meeting in which you had a conflict, it still needs to be declared. The disclosure is recorded in the minutes, and like we already said, the quorum is not lost in the event of a conflict unless you're less than two people, like two members. So, which you don't want to have. Indirect pecuniary interest, so we talked a little bit about this. Shareholder, director, or senior officer of a corporation has a controlling interest and is a director, senior officer of a corporation that offers its securities to the public, is a member or body that has a pecuniary interest in the matter. The member is a partner of a person or is in the employment of a person or body that has pecuniary interest. So we kind of talked about those already. These are the questions we say to ask yourself if you think you're in conflict. Do I have a financial interest in this decision, either positive or negative? Does it direct or affect my finances of my parent, spouse, or child? Is it indirect? Am I a shareholder, corporate officer, or a member of a body, partner, or an employee? And if yes, and not subject to exemptions, declare a conflict in writing and do not attempt to influence the vote. There's some exceptions by reason of the member having a pecuniary interest, which is in an interest common with electors generally. So if you have a conflict of interest that everyone has a conflict of interest on, then that's what they're talking about. It's shared amongst everybody. And by reason only of an interest of the member, which is in a remote or insignificant in its nature that it cannot be reasonably be regarded as likely to influence the member. So if it's something that's like really remote or insignificant, but you need to, we can't tell you if you have a conflict of interest. It's up to the member to declare. So just be mindful of that as well too. Like no one can say, oh, that person had a conflict of interest. It's really up to the member to declare if they have a conflict or not. But you can ask questions. You can ask yourself those questions, right? That if you think any of these things apply, then declare. So the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is another piece of legislation that applies to us. It's to protect the privacy of individuals, to provide for the disclosure of certain records upon request. So those are the freedom of information requests the municipality gets. Best practice to release documents which are already publicly available. So your agendas, your minutes, the council reports, those things are already posted on the website. They're already available for the public to look at. And communications regarding the business of the municipality are considered a record regardless of whether it's a device that is personal or not. So when you're speaking about business of the corporation, even if it's on your personal phone, it's still subject to the freedom of information. So we just wanted to point that out. So if you're having discussions about the business of the committee and those types of things, just be mindful of that. And my last slide is really about communications and surveys. We talk a little bit about this just so that members can understand that the boards and committees are subordinate and accountable to City Council. So there are we can't have statements that are critical of City Council or its members. They're not appropriate. And there was a time, and the example that I use for this, because we do want to have very open discussion, we want to have input, we want to have public input, but we're talking about very specific times where there was an instance, I believe it wasn't when I was employed by the clerk's office, but that there was a survey put out that was particularly critical in nature to start off with. So we want to make sure that we're receiving neutral public input as well. Like we want to make sure that we get as much information as possible. We really love public feedback. We love feedback from the committee members, but we also need to recognize that these are boards and committees that are subordinate to City Council. So I just put that in there for everyone's awareness, because we have had instances in the past where inappropriate statements critical of City Council have happened. But if you have any questions about that, feel free to let me know, and we can have a greater discussion about that. at another time, but I don't know if anyone has any questions. I know this was a very quick overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have right now, or if you want to think about it for a little bit. I know that the presentation can be circulated as well, so you can, you know, sift through it a little bit more. And if you have any questions, the clerk's office is happy to answer where we can. If not, you can always pop them to Virginia or Travis or whoever your staff liaison for future discussion, and we can try to do our best to help out. I know it was a lot. It's a lot of information in half an hour, so that's why I know it's a lot to digest, and we're happy to help after the fact as well. So.
Thanks for the presentation, Madison. In our last meeting, that was our first meeting for our anti-hate committee. We didn't go through the motions to. So how does that affect, or like moving forward, it'll be undertaken?
So if there's motions, so you would have a motion likely to approve the agenda, to approve minutes. It was the first meeting, so it might have been more to get some information. So there might not be any decisions being made necessarily at that meeting. The motions are usually when a key decision is happening. So not every agenda item will require a motion unless it's just being received as information. Like you might get a report, so those types of things. But if it's just a discussion, you might not need a motion for that. It's usually just when there's a decision or you're making a recommendation, because your decisions will often be a recommendation to council. So you would have a mover and seconder to say, we recommend such and such to city council. And then the staff liaison would write a report saying the anti-hate committee recommends this to council as something we should consider or do, or that type of thing. I'm trying to think, Virginia, are there any other motions that you guys would have other than recommendations to council, or to receive information, or, approve, adjourn? Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, like our minutes, our agenda, at the end adjournment. Often with, for example, with the Municipal Heritage Committee, it may be approving a grant and making that recommendation to council. It could be approving work that's being done on a property, because that has to go to the building department and they need confirmation that the committee's in favor of the proposed work that's taking place. So generally it's stuff that is required either by legislation for us or something that's a recommendation to council. So recently, last night, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee provided feedback on outdoor rinks, and they made a recommendation that'll be included in a report that we're writing to council.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that you don't always need a motion, but if there's any recommendations or things like the agenda and those types of things, you would have one. If you want staff, if you want to make a recommendation for staff to go research something, you could potentially have a motion for that to say, we want this information back to at the next committee meeting, those types of things. But if you have any questions about a specific motion that's required, feel free to reach out. That's not a problem.
Yeah, thanks. Every other board I've been on, we always approve the agenda and adjourn meeting. There's a motion for that. So it didn't happen. So I was like, just curious what's going on. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll make sure to follow up with Travis about that as well. Okay. Like I said, if you want to reach out to Virginia or myself after the fact too, if you think of something after that you're like, oh, I should have asked that question, feel free. We could do our best to answer any questions about procedure. But just wanted to thank everybody for your time today to talk about it. I know it was like fast and a lot of information, but we really appreciate you taking the time today to listen to us talk about procedure. It's something that we do every day in our office. So happy to help out when I can. Okay, thanks, Virginia.
Thanks.
Have a good day,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Thanks, Madison.
Take care.
Have a
Thank you
wonderful
for your
day.
time, Madison.